My name's Garrett Woodworth. I'm the project manager for cakephp. Joined the project in 2005, about 4 months after it was first released. It was initially released really simply, just a quick, easy MVC, and then some other developers picked it up after the original developer, and we proceeded to build onto it as much as we could to make things easier. So basically, why do we have cakephp? Why do we, oh yeah, I meant to do that. There we go. So why do we do cakephp? Why do we build cakephp? We wanted to make our lives easier building web applications. I don't know, how many people in here, I'm just curious, have used Cake before? So about half. That's good. Some others have heard about it? Cool. All right, nice. So there'll be a lot that we can cover, and hopefully we can do it pretty quickly. So anyway, we built cakephp, make our lives easier. PHP itself is a really unstructured language. It was, we used to see just tons and tons of scripts that would just be mashed up with HTML, mixing in with email and all sorts of different things. So the idea here was to bring structure. We needed to have something that would install anywhere. That's something that's really important to us. cakephp supports PHP 4 and 5. Works as easily across any version from 4.32 on. Works with MS SQL, Oracle, Firebird. I mean, obviously MySQL, Postgres. So you've got pretty much anywhere that you want to put an application, you can pretty much do it with cakephp. The other thing was to bring the structure, we needed to have something convention over configuration. This came from Ruby on Rails. This is something, and a lot of things that we do in terms of our structure came from Rails. That was the intent of the original developer, and so we've carried that on. Convention over configuration just makes a lot of sense. It means that we don't have to spend a lot of time setting things up. We can drop it in place and we can make it work. So it goes really well with installing it anywhere. It's flexible, it's extensible. There is a structure. That structure is meant to provide you and other developers, a team of developers, an idea of where things can go. We'll go through some of the structure and how it does still allow flexibility and extensibility, even though you're somewhat locked into how things are set up. But that allows you to think about everything else. That once you know where things go and once you know how to set things up, then you can just have fun and make stuff that works. Write less to do more. I think that's pretty simple. I think we all want to write less code. I think when we want to maintain a project, when we go back to a project after 3 months and client wants a new feature, or we want to add a new feature to our own web app, you don't want to have to look through 1,000 lines of code to figure out where you're going to put it in. You want to be able to just jump right in there, add something new, and move on. So less code is good. We've got a Cake growing community. Cake is really growing pretty fast, and it's still growing fast. It has been over the last 2 years. When I joined in August 2005, there were 150 people on the mailing list. There's now close to 7,800 people. So it's 7,000 people, close to 8,000 people, all answering questions, sitting there. We've got over 150 in the IRC channel on a daily basis. So things have really grown in the last 2 years. I think that's a really nice aspect of cakephp, and it means that a lot of extensions and a lot of ways to grow outside of the framework are being developed, and there's also a lot of good examples that people can use to go by. And then we've got MIT license. We're here at Open Source Conference, and MIT license is about as open source as you can get. So anyway, that's why. Basics behind cakephp. If you don't know it, if you do, this might be some review for you, so I'll try and go through it pretty quickly. Ooh, hey. MVC, so it's got a model view controller. I think a lot of us are familiar with the model view controller. I don't need to spend too much time on that. It has a front controller too, so basically everything goes through one place. Everything goes through the dispatcher. This makes it a lot easier for us to manage the request and to control, where everything's going. Routing, so another way that we control the request is we can route it to different places. We can understand what's actually being requested, and we can discern certain things from that are going to help us in our application. There's an ORM, so we have associations. Associate your models together so that you can pull back the data that you want more easily with less code. That's become really popular, and Cake uses it really well. It's all built in. It doesn't come from anywhere else. We've got our own unique ORM. Scaffolding. So this is something that people want to see so you can get prototyping really quickly. So basically you can, with a couple lines of code, you can build out your whole application. You can see what the database is going to do. You can start interacting with your database. You can create, read, update, and delete things with just one word. Validation. So I think every application that you're going to build is going to need some sort of validation. You need to know what kind of input's coming in, and we try and make validation as easy as possible, because otherwise it can be a nightmare, and I think we all know about that. So extending Cake, once you get by the basics, you want to start adding some more functionality on top of the normal framework. You've got behaviors. These help extend your models. So basically you can add functionality to your models. You can use the callbacks that are set up in the behaviors to do things automatically for you. We'll look at a little bit of that later. But those help out your models. Then we've got data sources. There aren't too many of these, but there is a Facebook data source that's being built. This is just another way. If you look at data, just like a database is another data source. You've got XML that could be a data source. Facebook could be a data source. Some APIs, act that way. So that's one way that you can get your data. Components. We've got a lot of built-in components. And that's just an extra place to put some code that you might use often in your controllers. So you throw it in a component, then you can put it in different applications, and it's all nicely encapsulated. Helpers really make your life in the view a lot easier. We all have our pains with markup, and Cake comes with some really nice built-in helpers. And you can make your own to do anything you need to in the view and make things really simple. So once you get that data back and you want to display it a certain way, you can do it easily. Plugins. This is a growing part of Cake. People are just really adapting a lot of their code to plugins now, and we can do a lot more with plugins. So you can put together components and helpers and behaviors all into one plugin. Then you can just move that plugin around. Or you could make a plugin actually have a blog, for instance. You could just have a blog plugin. Then you can move your blog plugin around as well. So those are being developed, and it's really nice way to add functionality quickly. And then last but not least, we have the vendors. So if working within the Cake structure doesn't work for you, you can always just throw a class inside of vendors, include it as you normally would with some simple line of code, and then create your own instance of a class and start using it. Or maybe it's some basic functions that you want to use. So that kind of breaks you outside of the structure. Might not be something you use all that often. Some more goodies. This is a lot of stuff that we have now in Cake 1.2. 1.2 we've been working on 1.2 for almost a year. We've added a lot of new features to 1.2. We've reduced the amount of code that you have to write tremendously, and added in a whole bunch of new things. So pagination, couple lines of code, you can paginate records. We'll look at that a little bit. Authentication, this is all like the Asian stuff over on this side. We got authorization. All this is built in, so it's really simple to add internationalization. Here we are in Europe, so there's a lot of different languages. A lot of people in the U.S. might not appreciate some of the difficulties, but internationalization and localization are really important for applications, and this is all built into Cake. You can do it statically or dynamically. And then configuration. So you might have your own configuration for your own application. Cake doesn't necessarily need too much configuration, but you might have some configuration that you want to set up for your app, so there's a class to do that. Testing. In 1.2, the test suite is included in the download. The Cake now has test coverage for a lot of the core, which helps obviously the stability, and it also allows you for your applications to test first and follow the test-driven development. I'm not going to go into testing too much, but there are some good presentations out there on it that'll become available. Debugging. Cake comes with a debugger, so it's got a stack trace. The default when you're programming like a web app as a JavaScript, it's got a nice little drop down that you can actually see the whole stack trace. You can see the context of the code where the error is, and so that really helps when it comes to debugging your app. There's error handling as well. Some people have said that you don't really need any documentation because Cake sort of tells you what to do. So if you've got a missing controller, there's a nice error message that shows up that tells you you've got a missing controller. You can also use this error handling in your own application to throw 404s and any kind of error message that you want to put out there. Caching. When it comes time to optimize your application, you have to look at caching. So in 1.2, we have cache engines for memcache, APC, Xcache, file caching, and even model caching. So you can cache anything, anywhere. There's a set class. The set class makes it really easy to work with arrays and objects. You can actually take objects, put it into the set class, and then get an array out. You can take an array, put it into the set class, and get an object out. So, plus all these other nice helper methods to extract from the arrays and add to them, combine them. The set class is really powerful. And there's a string class. The string class is being used with the Unicode support, and it also supplies us with a UUID. So if you set up your database primary keys to have 36 characters, it'll be a UUID automatically. Cake will just use a UUID and generate that all for you. So if you're going to use it, if you're going to have multiple databases running on the same application, you start to get really big. Auto increments not going to do it for you. So UUID is really important. That may even become the default. So we're still going. There's more. Unicode. This is something we actually put inside of Cake. It's a pure PHP implementation of Unicode. Yesterday there was a good talk on PHP 6 Unicode support, but it's still going to be there. We're still waiting for it. So we've included some functions inside of Cake to help us do that, and that's going to be adapted into the core of Cake too, so that we can handle all these character sets. And yeah, so it goes along with the internationalization and localization stuff too. Asset filters. This is a nice way so you can actually compress your CSS or your JavaScript on the way out, basically. Cache it, do whatever you want with it. You can put a class in between the output of your assets, whether it be an image or CSS or JavaScript. Reverse routing. We're not going to go through all this stuff today because, I mean, we've already been here for 15 minutes. Reverse routing, so you put an array into a link, for instance, into the helpers, and you get out the specified route. So you can fully control what the link looks like going in and what it looks like coming out. So if you change a route inside of your application, you don't have to go looking around for a string everywhere where that needs to change. It'll just do it dynamically. Resources. So this kind of goes along with assets in some ways, but RSS, XML. You can, you've got extensions to these things. When you have an extension, Cake understands that on the request coming in. It's going to actually pull out different view files and do different things based on the resource that's being requested. So it's a really nice way to do RSS and XML without having to change any controller code, any model code. You just add a different view and you're done. REST. Ooh, that one came in kind of cool. So there's REST support now inside of Cake. So if you're going to build an API, another thing that the resources help with, you might want to enable RESTful API. So Cake helps with that as well. XML, parsing it. There's an XML class to parse, so if you don't have simple XML or you don't have something else, this is another one of those things about installing it anywhere. When you build an application with Cake, if you use the stuff that's inside of Cake, it's going to work wherever you put the application, which is a really nice thing. HTTP authentication. So it goes along with the APIs, the RESTful APIs. You're going to want to protect those for certain people. So you use HTTP authentication, digest or basic, and you can control, and you can also quickly do that for an application that you're building for a client, for instance. If you don't feel like going through and setting up, a login system and a user database or whatever, you can just in 2 lines of code enable HTTP authentication. There's a socket class. I might have some time to show you some cool stuff with the socket that I did with IRC, but basically anything that can take a socket, you can do it. And so there's an HTTP socket as well. This makes it really easy to consume APIs and also provide them as well. We're not going to have time for all this stuff. There's a media view class. The media view class allows you to dynamically output JPEGs and SWIFTs and GIFs and whatever you want to do, whatever piece of media there is. There's a Magic DB class, so we actually read all the extensions and all the content types and output the proper headers. So that kind of helps with dynamic. And then there's a theme class as well, theme view class. So you can locate, if you want to have multiple themes in your application, you can locate those in different view files and move them around, and they're nice. The command line. Command line in Cake is a really amazing tool, and it's just a tool. It's not a requirement, but once you get used to it, it's really nice. So we provide some nice little command line utilities for ACL. The access control handles the authorization, so you can quickly add that. There's an extractor for the internationalization and localization stuff. So you can actually, when you build out your application, at the end of it, you just run the extractor from the command line. It'll go through your whole application, find all the strings that need to be converted, generate the PO and MO stuff for it, so you can go in and translate everything. Bake. Bake is the code generation utility. Once you've scaffolded an application, you might just bake the whole thing, and you've got all the code there that handles the create, read, update, and delete. Bake is really powerful. It's really nice. Maybe we'll have some time to look at that too. There's a schema command line utility, and this goes with the schema class. So this is kind of like a database migrations, but it looks at your whole database instead of just at one little piece of it, and it provides you with a snapshot of your database at a specific point in time. Commit that to SVN. Now you've got it versioned. You can go roll back if you need to. You can move forward, whatever the case is. Schema really helps manage your databases. If you alter something in the schema, you can apply that to your database, or if you alter something in your database, you can generate a new schema file. So it works both ways. There's an API shell. So if let's say you're on an airplane or somewhere and you want to check out what's going on in the API, you can just quickly type in a few commands and check that out. And then there's a console, an interactive console, so you could actually start debugging your models or building models or exploring your database from the command line with the interactive console, you can also check out some routes. I'm just going to quickly try and show here the API. So Cake API model, for instance, this lists out all of our model methods. So we can see what all of those are. And let's say we want to look at save all, for instance. This will tell us a little bit more about save all. It takes data and options, saves multiple individual records for a single model. So we can do all sorts of neat things like that. We can do Cake API helper form. And now we know everything that's in the form class. So this is all available to us as well. If I want to look at, let's say, the radio buttons, creates a radio set of widgets, or creates a set of radio widgets, tells us about the attribute or the parameters. So this is a little bit big for the screen. So let me just try and do that. Okay. So anyway, that's a really helpful utility when you're moving along. So now I got to go through all this again. Shouldn't have done that. But anyway, there's maybe we'll have some time for bake at the end too. Okay, so what's next? I don't know. Oh, bad cake. This is this was actually done by Amy Hoy, who's a big Rails developer. But one of the things that we want to look at is how do we build the right cake application. And traditionally, or let's say in the very, very beginning, a lot of people would have these tiny little skinny models, which was basically just the class, and then their controllers would handle all this logic and grab all this data, transform all the data, and do all these things, and then the views would be kind of small and tiny. But that's not the right way to do it. Nice of a Rails person to actually create this for us. So we have good cake, and this is the good cake. The good cake has some fat models, so you've got most of your logic in there. You can use that in other places, and you try and keep your controllers as skinny as possible so that you can look back at the controller, know exactly what's going on, know exactly what's happening, and then let the models do their job of dealing with the data. So just remember that. Thank you, Amy Hoy. /7 if you want to visit her website. She's got a lot of good articles on a lot of stuff that deals with rapid development. So think twice, code once. This is another little thing I try and remember, that Cake is really about writing less code. So if all you're thinking about is getting something done really fast, then you're not necessarily really thinking about your problem. And what you want to do is try and say, well, here's my problem. How can I boil that problem down into as few lines of code as possible? We've tried to do that inside of the Cake core. You should try and do it inside of your applications. Like I said, when you come back to it in a couple months, you're going to be really happy you did that. Okay, so move on to the models because they're really important. Some of you have already, played with Cake, but Cake has associations, has one associations, belongs to associations. So these are one-to-manys, one-to-one, one-to-many. Another one-to-many has many. We'll see an example of this. Has and belongs to many as well. So this is when you have a join table that's bringing it all together. So this is a user model, a sample user model. Class user extends app model. Has one profile. This is really typical. A user typically has one profile. Belongs to level. I just put that in there because we needed a belongs to, but you could belong to a level and that might control some access rights or something like that. Who knows? But anyway, that has many posts. We're kind of familiar with the whole example of posts. I think a lot of people are, at least. And so a user usually writes some posts, and they got many of them. And then has and belongs to many group. So this is just a sample of some of the associations that you can put in there. So a user maybe they're part of the PHP group, but they're also part of the Cake PHP group. So you need to have that set up. With associations, this is an extension on the has and belongs to many. So when you start dealing with has and belongs to many associations, you're going to start to say, oh, well, maybe I need some more data in my has and belongs to many table. How do we access that? Well, we have this with association, and while Cake does it automatically for us, it's nice to be able to name that. So this enables extra fields in your join tables, access to the model from the join table. So we have a group model, group table in this case. We've got a users table, and we're going to join these together with the group's users. So, and here we go, we match these things up with some nice arrows. And so this is our join, but you can see that our group's users, we want to know a date. We want to know a date when the user joined the group. So that's going to be specific to that association. It's got to be in that table. How do we access that? So we add the with. Here we go, we're back to our same model again. And here we're specifying the group. This is the alias that we're using. The class name is group as well. And then we're going to call it with grouped. So that this is how we're going to do it. Cake by default would call this groups users or groups user. And you could access it that way, but we're going to call it grouped so it makes it easier to access. In the before save function, if there's some data, if the group array of data is filled up, then we're going to save that into the grouped table. That would, assuming that would have our date in it, that would have our user ID, that would have our group ID. We'd save that right into that group's users table that we saw before. So it's very simple, very easy to add data into that table. So then we might be using the with model inside of our controller. Maybe we want to get some information out. So here's an index function where we find everything by the grouped. So we find all the grouped users and we pull those back. Maybe we're going to pass in a group ID here, or maybe we're going to pass in a user ID to find out all those users groups. But anyway, this is a way we can access that other model. If you look at it, the first user is our model, and then the with association. So it's pretty simple to see how you might access that. Users index, this is where we print out our data. So here we can print out our arrays of data that we get back, the group name, the grouped date. Well, I have tag left over. That was an old one. I copied and pasted. Okay, so that's simple. Whoa, how did I get back to the end? Okay, well, that stinks. Technical problem. Sorry about that. I think I held the key down. All right, so behaviors. That's where we are. We're at behaviors. Okay, so behaviors, like I was saying about behaviors, this is a way to extend and add functionality to your model that you can bring across multiple applications. So they enhance the models, they encapsulate reusable functionality, and use some callbacks for auto magic, which is nice. Built into the core, there's a tree behavior that does your modified pre-order tree traversal stuff, left and rights, and if you have to work with a tree of data, you need to use this behavior. And believe me, it saves you a lot of time if you have to work with a tree. ACL behavior, that makes it easy to create access control for a user, for instance, or for a record. Let's say you have a post and you want to control that post, you can use the ACL behavior to do that. And then there's a translate behavior, and the translate behavior allows you to dynamically translate content. So if you've got a translator sitting there and they read a post that was in English, for instance, and they want to translate it, they can add it right to that table. And it can be associated with that record so that when somebody comes to the site with German, for instance, if that German translation exists in the IATN content table, then you can access it. And you'll get that out instead of the English version, which is kind of cool. What do we got? So this is a cool behavior. This extends the model behavior. It's just a simple example of what a behavior might look like. These are the callback functions, before find, after find. These are the same basic callback functions that you have in every model. So these get called before you do a find or after, or before a save or after a save. You know if it's created or if it's been updated, before delete, after delete. And then there's an error. So if you have an error, you can find out and you can do something with it, put out an error message or send an email or do something else, which is kind of nice. So, and then you can add custom methods to your behavior as well. This is the be cool method, and it's going to take an amount, and then it's going to save it to the current model, whatever that model that is, and it takes the settings from up top. We'll show how that's used, and it puts the amount so it saves that. So here we are going to use it. Let's see. Quickly, we're going to use the post extends that model. We've got the cool behavior. This is our settings here. We've got an array. The field that you saw was being used in the bottom of that method there is cool amount. So we can add to that, and then we can use it inside of our controller. Be cool, just like any other method inside of your model. So that's a really easy way to do it. You might need a cool behavior for a lot of other models, so this helps out. Validation, like I said, validation is really important. It's the king. We've got a bunch of validation methods: alphanumeric, between, blank, credit cards, comparisons. You can define your own custom ones: date, decimals, email, equal to, file, IP addresses, max length. Yeah, it goes on for a little while. Number, numeric, phone. Okay, I guess you get the idea. But validation is really important, and we make that a priority inside of Cake 1.2. Here's how you'd set it up. So you've got your model. You put a validate array in your model. It might be required. It might have a length requirement to it with a max length of 100 is the rule. And then the body might just be alphanumeric. You only want alphanumeric characters in there. So now we're on to components. They enhance the controllers. So it's kind of a same old story here. Encapsulate reusable functionality, use callbacks for auto magic. There's an auth component, ACL component, session component. All of these things are really useful. The session component, for instance, the Cake session class is really pretty advanced. Goes much further than the core PHP sessions. Does things like in high security mode, for instance, it will actually rewrite the session every time and store the old session data in there. So this can prevent session hijacking. So security is really important to us too. We have a cookie component. There's an email component which handles HTML plain text email. Security and request handler component which helps with the resource mapping that we saw before. Using the email component, pretty simple. We just add the component to our controller in the var components. Then we've got access to it. We can simply send an email. And more on the emails here. We're going to send HTML and text. So this is going to have a template. Our template's going to be located in our elements directory inside of our views. And we can have a layout for this as well. So you can send both HTML and text at the same time. You can attach attachments. You can do a lot of different things with the email class. The security class is really important. This is going to actually just talk about that HTTP authentication that we saw before. This is just to quickly add some protection to your site if you want to show it to somebody, or if you've got an API, you're going to want to have some HTTP auth on there all the time. So this is how you might add that. So you've got a controller, you add the component, and then you can require login on specific methods, and then you can set up your login users, where the user and then the password. So that would be it. You get a little drop down if you went and you went to the browser and you tried to pull up any of these add, edit, delete functions. You'd quickly get that drop down, and you'd have to type in Cake and too easy to move on. So the other thing that the security component does when you add it, as soon as you add it, it does something to protect against cross-site request forgeries. So what can happen in that case, if you're not familiar with it, is basically somebody could create a form on some other site, on their own site, let's say, and it's going to actually post back to your site. And you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know where it's coming from. It looks like any other form post might. But with the security component, there's a hash generated. It's based on the values that are currently in the form. If you use that, it makes it really, really difficult, next to impossible, to do something like that. So it's a great protection if you're really concerned about your web app and people attacking your web app. It's something that you enable right off the start, right when you go public with it. Authentication. This is something that's really helpful when you're, obviously, most web apps nowadays have some sort of authentication. And so here we're going to add the auth component. That's it. Now every single method, every single action that somebody might visit is now protected and would automatically redirect them to a login form. So you just have to create a login form. You can authenticate any model, a user, a member, an editor, anything you want. So you can authorize against models, controllers, or other abstract objects. So if you want to create your own authorization, you can do that. You don't have to use the built-in ACL. You can just use a model or controllers, and then it automates the login. So you don't have to write a login method. All you need is a login view that has a username and password field, and you're pretty much good to go. So here's how we'd set it up. Var components auth. We've got our before filter. So in the before filter, we do a lot of setup for components. That allows the components to actually do all the automagic handling. There's a startup method that gets called inside of a component, and so that will allow you, before filter allows you to set things up that'll be used inside a startup, and then startup can kick you back out or allow you to move on. So here we're going to set the user model to be a member. We've got a login action that we're going to define. These are all sort of the defaults anyway, so we don't really need to define these. You could define the login action as an array or a string. It's up to you. The array would use the reverse routing that we talked about a little bit before. And then here we're going to set the fields that the authentication component should use. So we named our field p-word instead of password inside of the database, so we want to set that up. And let's say the username, for instance, you might want to use an email instead of a username, so you can use that, or maybe a nickname is your database field. That's up to you, but you can control it. Then we're going to authorize against a member model here. We're going to also map some actions, so we know that these are the create, read, update, and delete actions. And we can control those from inside of our model. When you're dealing with models, you're basically dealing with create, read, update, and delete. That's why you map the actions. So when we go to authorize inside of our model, we can see how to do that. So there's an is authorized method. That's the one that gets called. That's the callback for authorization, and gets a user, a controller, and then an action. That action is actually the create, read, update, or delete when you're dealing with models. So here we just have a switch, and if the user role is an admin, then we allow them to delete stuff. Otherwise, we return false. So right now, this one only handles delete. So what I was thinking about doing was, instead of, I've got a bunch more slides, but we're running out of time. Well, trying to decide what we have time for. We only have 10 more minutes. So what I could do is quickly show you some bake stuff, because I think bake is pretty interesting, and a lot of people are not familiar with bake. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bake a new project. Actually, I'm going to change into my FOSDEM directory here, which is on my desktop. So now I'm in FOSDEM. I'm going to bake a project called demo. That looks okay. It's going to save it in my desktop FOSDEM directory, which I've already set up as a virtual host. So that created the file. Now what I can do is I can just go over to Safari quickly. You can see demos are already there. This can also be taken by FOSDEM, I think. So sweet, demo got baked by cakephp. The temp directory is writable. It did that all for me. Your database configuration file is not present. I've got to do some other stuff here, right? So if I want to connect up to my database, first thing I'm going to do is connect up to my database. I'm going to actually create a new database called FOSDEM. I'm going to add some tables into here. Maybe I'll have one called talks. Oops, spelt it wrong. Talks. I'm just going to use the auto increments for now because it should be easier. Auto increment that. That's going to ask for a primary key. Yep. I'm going to add in a name for the talk, varchar 200. I'm going to require that so it's not going to be null. And then I'm going to have a description of the talk. So I got 10 minutes. I got 9 minutes left. Oh no, 10. He's just showed up the sign. Okay, good. There's a description. So this is going to be a text field here. I got distracted. Oh man, cancel. Text. Okay, so this program doesn't work quite as well as Cake. It's still in, okay, tiny text is fine. We don't care. Okay, we're also going to add in a created date time field. These are automatically updated by Cake, so we might as well add them. Created and modified, date time. Boom. Okay, cool. So now we got a database. It's got something in it at least, but we're going to go back in here. I don't know if you can all see that. Let me know if you have trouble seeing it because it's way down at the bottom. I'll move it up. So you can see that. Now I'm going to do cake, bake, db, config, because I need a database configuration. If you remember back here, it told us we needed a database configuration. We're going to use the default database, MySQL. You can see all the options there. A lot of options, no persistent. It's on the local host. I don't need a port, root, password. Yeah, I'm going to use an empty password. FOSDEM is our database name. We don't need a prefix or to deal with the encoding because the default's UTF-8, so we're good there. That looks all good. It asks us for some other, make sure we verify it. Looks okay. We don't need to add anything new. So, oh, sweet. I am, exactly right. Thank you for telling me that. I have to change into demo, and then I can do the same thing again. Luckily, we can speed through it because all the defaults are set up nicely, and all I have to do is type in FOSDEM here. And who pinpointed that? Thank you for that, anyway. Looks okay, yeah. No. Okay, well, that's just as bad. No, not really. It's fine. That had to do with the temp directory not being very happy at who the user was. I should probably just do that, do all of it. Oh, sudo. We'll get this guy. Hey, it's my local computer. I could do that. Okay, cool. So anyway, we got all green bars. We're all happy now, right? So I got 6 minutes, and I want to go really fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a lot. I'm going to do cake, bake, all, and then I'm just going to call it talk. And let's see if that works. Yeah, so I just did everything that's needed for the talks. Okay, cross fingers. Boom. There's that. Okay, so here we have our talks already set up. I can add a new talk. This is Ji Woo. By the way, that's my name. That's my nickname anyway. Description, this is a great talk. Bam, done. Okay, I can edit that. I can go back to the list. I can delete it. It'll ask me a little confirmation message. Okay, well, that's cool. Well, let's see what this actually did. What did that do? Open up TextMate. So here we are with the talks. So it created, I don't know if everyone can see that, but I can pretty much, let me see if I can increase the font. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Bigger. Oh, there we go, it's shift. How's that? Good? Okay, so very simple created the talks controller, indexed, view, add, edit, delete actions very nicely, very simply, uses session set flash. It even handles the internationalization that we were talking about before. So these are the types of strings that you might have with internationalization. This is what the extractor would pick up, and it would actually then put out a file for you so that you could do that, so you could translate. Then it's going to create, it created my views directory as well. There's my talks. So there's my add form. Really simple add form. I mean, there's some markup in there, but this markup is there so that you can see what's happening. If you want to make this even simpler, you can basically do form create dot form 4 minutes inputs, and then I'm going to add my form end in here. Okay. And then I'll just take all this stuff out. Well, no, I'll leave in that action link there, but I can basically get rid of the rest of this form. And in one line of code, I can go back to my add form, a new talk, and I got the same thing. Now I've got the created and modified field because inputs actually reads every single table from the database and knows what you have. So I can actually, if I don't want that, I can add these in here. So let's say I don't want the created one, but I want the modified one. So I can take and add in the modified field. Creates the field set for me, the name, everything like that. One line of code. Takes us longer to print out this table. So I mean, we've basically very, very easily we can do forms. What else do we want to do? We got 3 minutes left. I mean, we already kind of built the application. So, hey, how about we'll add in that before filter, right? So we can do function before filter, but I'm going to add in my security component first. For components equals security, added that, bam. Now I can set up this security login, users, array, cake. What was it? Too easy was the password, right? Okay, so then we'll set up some security. What was it? Login actions or something like that? I think it's a method index. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but I don't use it very often, but we'll see what happens. Actually, maybe we'll just make this add. This security login action. No, what is it? All right, let me go back to my presentation. Wait, we still have time. Here it is. Oh, require login. Yeah, that's easier. Makes more sense, too. Oh, oops, wrong thing. Oh, there we go. So we've got HTTP authentication. Too easy. I'm going to remember. No, I'm not going to remember it. Too easy. Did I spell it right? No, I probably used the wrong code. No, login users. All right, anyway, it's just a demo. How about I'll do regular auth, and then we can show you. I'll show you that instead. So here it's gonna. Well, now it wants a users. So forget that too. But if we wanted to add users, we could do that. We've got out of time. Darn. Wait, I still have 51 seconds. No, that's good. Anyway, that was enough. You get the idea, and in not too much time, we built something that pretty much functions. So you can see the debug output down at the bottom, and I'll take questions. Questions? Anybody? Yeah, in the back. Compared to Rails, I think we do really well. And yeah, and thanks for, he asked about performance in case anyone didn't hear me, and he was specifically asking about Rails. I think PHP in general is a lot faster than Rails. We haven't done any specific benchmarks against it. The benchmarks that have been done put cakephp in the top 3 of the frameworks, and as far as how much easier it makes your life, it's really worth it. And you know, you can get down to caching at the end and whatever you need to do, but Mozilla's using it on their add-on site. They've got a 12 machine cluster. They were actually, they upgraded from Cake 1.1.12 to Cake 1.1.19, and I think they were able to even take out a couple machines from their cluster, so they were pretty happy about that. We're getting faster. Yep. Well, I think if you were here for the beginning of the talk, it's pretty clear why you'd want to use Cake versus the question was, why would you want to use Cake instead of Symfony or Zend? And for me, it was really simple when I was choosing a framework. I wanted something that worked out of the box without having to dive into the command line, without having to do a ton of setup, without having to do anything. I want to build applications. I want to do this. I want in 3 minutes or 10 minutes, I want to be able to put together an app. I don't want to sit there spending a whole ton of time trying to set something up because I know that when I go to deploy it, the same thing's going to happen. And I'm going to go through the same headaches to deploy something. And you have to remember as a developer that your job doesn't end when your application is, when you're done building your application. Your job continues on in the deployment process when that application goes public, and anything that's involved in that, you have to remember that that's going to come back. So that's why I choose it. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah? You're right. The question, in case anyone in the back didn't hear him, was a templating language. And by default, no, Cake doesn't include a templating language. PHP is a templating language in a lot of ways. And if you saw, I don't know if you, I could show you quickly, but if you use, you can use, you know, for each with a colon, kind of feels like a template, you know. I mean, there's ways around it, and so we don't see the need for a template. We want to keep things fast, but there has been a Smarty view created, so if you want to use Smarty templates, or if you want to use, I think there's a PHP towel template view as well now, so you could just create your view, extend the core view, and use whatever template you want. Yeah, middle. What is this, a beatdown on Garrett today or something? I mean, it depends on the shared host. I don't know. I mean, shared hosts, they've got their own configurations. It's hard to cover every single scenario, but I would say that more often than not, it's either a misconfiguration there or, you know, I don't know what the exact problem is. You can ask me afterwards and maybe I can help you figure it out. But I've installed it on 4 or 5 shared hosts without any difficulties, and I haven't really heard of too many problems with it being on shared hosts. The only thing is usually the HT access, you know, mod rewrite stuff, but other than that, usually not a problem. Anything else? All right, cool. Well, thanks guys for coming.